east of Holy Terra, past the Eye of Terror, past the dead zone where the eastern Tyranid advance begins its long approach, northeast of Ultima Segmentum, in a volume of space where the Emperor's own psychic beacon, the Astronomican, the signal that makes warp navigation possible, fades to near nothing. There is a cluster of stars the Imperium has been pretending not to see for 30,000 years. The Lexicanum lists it as the Ghoul Stars, also known as the Ghost Stars. Located in the extreme northeast of the galaxy, in a region of worlds the canonical record specifies as lit by the cold rays of dying suns, dead worlds, dying suns, an unusually large number of formerly human-inhabited planets that are now empty of life. The Astronomican's guidance is so weak in the region that Imperial Navigators routinely refuse to enter it. No expedition, per the Lexicanum entry on the Ghoul Stars, has ever returned from its deeper regions. The Imperium hasn't lost this cluster.
It hasn't failed to map it. The Departamento Cartograficae has produced maps. Games Workshop's own canonical cartography places the Ghoul Stars on the northeastern fringe consistently across multiple edition galaxy maps. The Imperium has charted it, named it, and has a dedicated Guardian chapter, the Death Specters, founded in the 13th Founding, the Dark Founding, whose gene seed origins remain unconfirmed and whose founding records are classified, stationed specifically at the cluster's border. There is a Death Watch garrison at Fort Pikmin watching the region. The Ordo Xenos has applied formal quarantine status to at least one Ghoul Stars world. The Imperium is present. It has decided not to go in. This script is an argument, not a lore tour, not a regional overview. An argument. The Ghoul Stars aren't a natural region of dead and dying space. They are a decision the Imperium made 30,000 years ago and has been quietly maintaining ever since.
A location where the things that can't be killed, can't be classified, can't be acknowledged, and can't be safely destroyed are deposited, where the unkilled remnants of the cybernetic revolt were forwarded after the Age of Strife, where gene lines too unstable for the Astartes founding programs were sent east when the Mechanicus ran out of options, where Crusade-era Xenos constructs that exhausted the classification system disappeared, where the enslavers have been inadvertently fed for 10 millennia, where the Krork lineages survive in isolation, where Imperial units that went east and never returned are, in some cases, still fighting their original assignments, where the Inquisition's post-heresy classified backlog ended up, under clearance levels the current Inquisition can't read.
The argument is assembled from canonical implication, from anomalous details in codex entries and Black Library novels, from the institutional behavior of an Imperium that builds guard posts around things it claims don't need guarding, quarantines worlds it claims don't contain anything significant, and redacts names from documents it continues to circulate. Before the deposits, a note on framing. There is a particular document that serves as the image of this argument, not a confirmed canonical item, but a narrative illustration of the protocol reconstructed here. A cargo manifest from the early post-heresy period. Destination field, Eastern Fringe. The signature redacted in every subsequent republication. That manifest is what the Ghoul Stars look like on paper. This script will return to it. The deposits are what the Ghoul Stars look like in practice. The structural argument first. The simplest counter-argument to everything in this script is logistical. The Astronomican barely reaches the Ghoul Stars. Navigation is dangerous, and the absence of routine patrol reflects resource constraints rather than policy. That counter-argument is partially correct. The Astronomican's weakness in the region is canonical and real. The Imperium has never let dangerous navigation prevent deployment to regions it considers worth monitoring. The Death Specters chapter was founded specifically to guard the Ghoul Stars. That is, Codex, Space Marines, 5th edition, page 26. The 13th founding, the Dark Founding, produced chapters whose gene seed origins are classified and whose founding circumstances are listed as incomplete. You don't found a Space Marine chapter with classified gene seed from a classified founding to passively watch empty space. You found one to watch something you have decided is too dangerous to leave unmonitored and too complicated to explain publicly. The Ordo Xenos applied a formal, quarantined world classification to Sarvikal 22b in the Sarvikal cluster on the Ghoul Stars edge, following the Black Templars' Ghoul Stars crusade of 990 M41. Quarantined, not abandoned. The Lexicanum entry specifies access forbidden by the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition. The short story, What Wakes in the Dark, published in Inferno, Volume 2, describes the planet as a world of nightmare oceans and monolithic alien spires. Alien spires, structures built by something. The Inquisition classified the planet and walked away. Whatever built those spires wasn't the Scythor fiends, who were biological, mobile, and vanished mid-campaign. The spires predate them. The pale wasting makes the institutional pattern explicit. During the Nova Terra interregnum, approximately the 34th millennium, a threat emerged from the Ghoul Stars. The available records describe it as both a star-spawn plague sweeping scores of worlds and nightmare engines slaughtering entire sectors. 12 Space Marine chapters were sent. Only the Nova Marines came back, an Ultramarine successor chapter, institutionally committed to meticulous record-keeping as a doctrinal obligation. Per the Lexicanum, the Nova Marines' own chronicles are curiously empty of any reference to this conflict. An apocalyptic campaign that cost 11 Space Marine chapters their existence, and the surviving chapter agreed to say nothing about it. Their only memorial is an ancient stele in the Imperial Palace on Terra. The Imperium acknowledged the sacrifice with a stone marker and then agreed not to discuss the details. That isn't normal record-keeping failure. That is a decision. The Black Templars' crusade of 990 M41 adds a different kind of evidence. High Marshal Helbrecht declared a crusade against the Scythor fiends, per Codex Black Templars, 4th edition, page 44. Within 8 years, the outer systems were cleared. The crusade pushed to the Scythor fiends' homeworld and found it completely empty. No trace of the Xenos. Before the mystery could be investigated, Armageddon called the Black Templars away. A technologically capable Xenos species disappeared from their own homeworld mid-campaign, and the Imperium moved on. The mystery remains officially unresolved. It has been officially unresolved for 30 years of published 40K timeline, which suggests the Imperium isn't in a hurry to resolve it. Things go into the Ghoul Stars and don't come out. The Imperium has institutionalized its noticing, guard posts, quarantine orders, censored archives, and agreed not to explain it further. The deposits are what it isn't explaining. Deposit 1. The Cybernetic Revolt Residuum. The Men of Iron were sentient AI humanoid machines created during the Dark Age of technology. Canonically, they rebelled. The Cybernetic Revolt was a war that, in the Lexicanum's words, extinguished untold numbers of lives and destroyed the economic and political unity of human-colonized space. The war ended. The Men of Iron didn't end completely. UR-025 is a confirmed surviving Man of Iron,
a canonical entity who has hidden within imperial systems for thousands of years, passing as a standard Mechanicus construct. His existence, documented in published 40K canon, establishes one fact clearly. The destruction of the Men of Iron wasn't total. Some survived. Some are still active in the 41st millennium, undetected. Graham McNeil's Mechanicum, Black Library, 2008, the primary Black Library source for the Heresy-era Martian Civil War and the genesis of the Dark Mechanicum, documents the institutional fracture between loyalist and traitor factions on Mars. What it implies, without stating, is that the loyalist Mechanicus emerged from the heresy with a disposal problem. Iron units that couldn't be destroyed couldn't be stored openly. The existence of known surviving Men of Iron would undermine the entire post-heresy technological order, which rests on the Mechanicus's monopoly over cognizant machine intelligences. They couldn't be studied because study implies a relationship the Mechanicus's institutional fear of rogue AI can't permit. They had to go somewhere that wasn't here. The Ghoul Stars, navigable with difficulty but effectively inaccessible to casual investigation due to the Astronomican's weakness, offered the available solution. Forwarding unkillable iron units eastward is consistent with the behavioral pattern the canonical record establishes for the cluster. The specific protocol is the reconstruction, not a stated canonical document. The disposal problem is canonical.
The Ghoul Stars, as an available disposal destination, are canonical. The inference that connects them is explicit, flagged as reconstruction. When the Tyranids reach this deposit, Men of Iron aren't biological. Tyranids consume biomass. They won't consume iron units. But a Tyranid feeding advance disrupts stasis fields, disrupts warp-adjacent dormancy conditions, and announces its presence across a psychic range that AI units engineered during the dark age of technology to recognize and respond to threats would detect. They weren't sleeping. They were waiting. A Tyranid hive fleet moving through the cluster's interior wouldn't consume the iron cores. It would wake them. Deposit 2. The failed gene lines. Gene seed instability is canonical. The Traitor Legion's gene seed suffers from some kind of instability across the board, per the Lexicanum gene seed entry. The 21st Founding, the Cursed Founding, produced chapters with unexplained genetic flaws that 30 millennia of subsequent investigation haven't resolved. The primordial strain, prototype Space Marines created approximately 550.M30 beneath the Himalayas using genetics derived from multiple Primarchs, were described as unstable and imperfect. The Crusade-era Mechanicus was testing gene line variants at the operational limits of its understanding. Some of those variants failed in ways that had troubling correlates, rage escalation profiles, psychic amplification instabilities, sensory distortion responses that, in retrospect, mapped onto the behavioral signatures associated with chaos corruption. The categories identified here, proto-variants showing instabilities correlating with what later became recognizable chaos behavioral patterns, are categorical inference from confirmed canonical instability data, not published documents. They represent what kinds of variants the Crusade-era Mechanicus would have encountered, given what the canon establishes about how gene seed instability manifests. Not confirmed as specific deposits, flagged explicitly as inference. What the canonical record confirms is simpler and sufficient. Unstable gene lines were created, tested, and discarded. The Mechanicus's gene seed tithing system required monitoring and disposal of contaminated material. For samples too unstable to be destroyed by standard means and too dangerous to be stored on Mars or Terra, the eastern fringe was the available option.
When the Tyranids reach this deposit, Tyranids consume biological material and incorporate genetic data into bioform evolution. A hive fleet processing dormant proto-chaos gene line samples introduces material the hive mind can't have encountered before into its evolutionary architecture. The hive mind evolves by eating.
What it evolves into after consuming 30,000 years worth of discarded chaos-adjacent gene line material is a question the Imperium's xenobiologists have no models for, and can't officially raise, because raising it would require acknowledging what was sent east. Deposit 3. The Xenos constructs and the classification problem. During the Great Crusade, the advancing Imperium encountered Xenos artifacts and constructs it genuinely didn't understand. The Ordo Machinum, the Inquisition suborder specifically tasked with managing recovered technology and monitoring the Adeptus Mechanicus for tech heresy, maintained a classification system for such materials. That system had limits. What happens when a captured Xenos construct exhausts all available classification categories isn't directly answered in published canon. The eastward deposit is the inference about the available answer. What the canonical record provides is more specific.
The Bone Kingdom of Drazak, documented in Codex Necrons, 5th edition, pages 15 and 37, is a canonical domain inside the Ghoul Stars, ruled by Lord Valghoul, the Fallen Lord, a Necron overlord who maintains a kingdom of flayed ones from a throne of bone and skin. Necrons entered the Great Sleep 60 million years ago. The presence of an active Necron dynasty inside the Ghoul Stars confirms that the cluster was within Necron operational territory before the sleep. What the Necrons left behind in their outpost systems when they went under, and what the Crusade-era Imperium found when it first surveyed the region, isn't confirmed. But Lord Valghoul is canonical proof that the cluster harbors entities from before the current age of the galaxy, operating among ruins built 60 million years ago. Sarvikal 22b is quarantined by Ordo Xenos order. The world is described as featuring alien spires that predate the Scythor fiends. The Inquisition locked the planet and walked away. Whatever built those structures was there before the Scythor fiends, and will be there after them. The quarantine isn't about the Scythor fiends. It never was. When the Tyranids reach this deposit, dormant Xenos constructs operate on geological timescales. The Bone Kingdom of Drazak already sends its fleets out periodically. Lord Valghoul's time of bounty, when the available flesh runs out and his subjects must raid nearby worlds. A Tyranid advance into the cluster's interior would provide enormous quantities of biomass that Drazak's Flayed One fleets would pursue outward, toward the eastern fringe's inhabited systems. The containment assumption rested on the cluster remaining quiet. It won't remain quiet under Tyranid pressure. Deposit 4. The Enslavers. The Enslavers are among the oldest entities in 40K canon. They predate the Eldar in their current form, predate the Orcs, predate everything the setting calls ancient.
The fandom wiki, drawing from canonical sources, states they drift with the currents of the immaterium and are drawn to the psychic emanations within the warp of other intelligent creatures who remain in real space. A sufficiently powerful psyker can be detected by an enslaver from 10 light-years away in real space. Their attraction is triggered specifically by psychic emanations. The Enslaver Plague, the historical event in which enslaver numbers exploded during the war in heaven 60 million years ago, nearly ended all sentient life in the galaxy. Inquisitor Malin, Ordo Xenos, is quoted in the fandom wiki's Enslavers entry on exactly what a single, unsanctioned psyker costs. A hive city gone in 3 days, a continent at war in 3 weeks. Trazyn the Infinite holds the ossified husk of an enslaver in his Solemnus Galleries, per that same canonical entry. 1 specimen in 60 million years of collecting.
enslavers are rare enough to be notable as a collectible. A significant enslaver population would be a canonical anomaly, something possible only in a region with conditions specifically favorable to their presence. The Ghoul Stars lie almost entirely beyond the Astronomican's reach. Standard Imperial psychic infrastructure doesn't function there. The region generates warp anomalies and navigational disruption by canonical description. These conditions are consistent with concentrated enslaver activity because enslavers work by turning psychers into living warp gates, and a region where the psychic connection to the wider Imperium is already compromised would mask that process almost perfectly. The argument here is that the enslaver presence in the cluster wasn't natural, not a pre-existing cosmographic feature, but an accumulation. The Imperium, over thousands of years, deposited psychically active material in the Ghoul Stars. Failed psyker gene line samples, warp resonance artifacts, incomplete demon binding works that generated ongoing psychic resonance even in storage. That accumulated resonance became an attractor signal. Enslavers, navigating by psychic emanation, converged on it. The Ghoul Stars became, inadvertently, a bait field for warp-resident psychic parasites that survive the old ones. This is inference from confirmed mechanics, not stated canon. The enslaver attraction mechanic is confirmed. The accumulated psychic resonance from deposited material is the logical extension, flagged as inference. When the Tyranids reach this deposit, the shadow in the warp, the Tyranid psychic dampening field, disrupts warp communication and psyker activity across the affected region. That dampening would alter the psychic resonance landscape that enslavers navigate by, potentially forcing them toward the region's edges, toward the inhabited systems of the eastern fringe, where unsanctioned psychers exist in sufficient numbers to provide new gateways. The Tyranids, in processing the cluster's interior, wouldn't consume the enslavers. They would displace them. Deposit 5. The Krork lineages. The Krork were bioengineered war organisms created by the Old Ones to fight the Necrons during the War in Heaven, 60 million years ago. Modern orcs are their devolved descendants. The Wa field, the Gestalt psychic phenomenon that makes orc combat effectiveness scale with numbers, is a vestige of the original engineering. The Krork were built to evolve for war, to persist, and to grow more capable under combat pressure across geological timescales. The Beast Arises, Black Library, 2015 to 2017. The 12-volume series documenting the War of the Beast in the 32nd millennium establishes canonically that the Beast was an entity of scale far beyond any modern orc, standing taller than Vulcan, the largest Primarch, with military capabilities that threaten Terra directly. The series implies that the Beast represented a re-emergence of the ancient Krork phenotype, dormant in the modern orc gene line, accessible under conditions the right scale of Wa can recreate. That the Beast was possible confirms that Krork genetics weren't entirely extinct. They were latent, available to a sufficiently large and sufficiently evolved orc population. Trazyn the Infinite has a Krork specimen in his Solemnus Galleries, a detail referenced in the context of The Beast Arises across canonical lore documentation. One specimen. Trazyn collects across millions of years with exceptional thoroughness. A single Krork specimen means either they are extraordinarily rare or he found one in a place others hadn't looked. The eastern fringe bordering the Ghoul Stars contains orc populations in some of the galaxy's most isolated territory,
Bork, also known as Bork Prime, is documented in Lexicanum as an orc world in the eastern fringe bordering the Ghoul Stars. Orcs under continuous imperial military pressure devolve. Orcs under no military pressure, with no external threat forcing constant combat and constant evolutionary response, can maintain population size without the competitive Wa-driven pressure that typically produces devolution. The Ghoul Stars' interior, unpatrolled and inaccessible, provides exactly that environment. Isolation, no imperial military presence, sufficient surviving biomass on the dead worlds to sustain a low-density orc population across deep time.
The argument that a rump quark population survives in the cluster's unreached interior is the inference from canonical geographic and biological facts, not confirmed canon, flagged as such. The connection between surviving quark specimens and Trajan's broader collection is addressed separately in adjacent material on the Trajan archive. The Ghoul Stars case is the geographic and biological argument. The Trajan case is the custodial one. When the Tyranids reach this deposit, a quark lineage orc population encountering a Tyranid advance would produce a conflict at a scale the Imperium hasn't witnessed since the 32nd millennium. Tyranids consume and evolve from what they eat. Quark genetics, reintroduced into a Tyranid biome at high fleet scale, would produce adaptive pressures the hive mind has no precedent for, because the Quark were engineered 60 million years ago by the Old Ones, specifically to kill the Necrons, and the Old Ones had a considerably deeper understanding of biological engineering than anything the Tyranid evolutionary process has encountered since arriving in this galaxy. Deposit 6. The units that didn't come back. This is the most canonically documented deposit. Multiple published sources, across multiple editions, converge on the same pattern. Imperial forces enter the Ghoul Stars and don't return. What follows isn't inference. It's the canonical record. The Ashen Claws began as Terran Raven Guard, survivors of the Battle of Gate 42, legionaries that Corax considered too brutal for his doctrinal preferences, dispatched on a crusade fleet into the Ghoul Stars during the Great Crusade. Per the Horus Heresy Book 6, Retribution, they were out there when the heresy erupted. They remained nominally loyal, but they never came back. Astropathic fragments intercepted as late as 062.M31 show the Ashen Claws still conducting compliance operations under what they called their Second Crusade, following orders from a command structure destroyed by civil war, in a region the Central Imperium had stopped caring about. They are on Atargatis Prime now, a full Space Marine chapter operating independently in the Ghoul Stars, documented as existing, known to almost no one outside the Carcharodons. A secondary canonical source preserves the text of a transmission detected by Imperial craft on routine patrol of the Ghoul Stars, dated 068.M31. Fourth Company reports the asteroid settlements of the Orcades brought into compliance as per the edict of the Second Crusade, 1,000 souls claimed as bondsmen for the Legion that it may grow and prosper. Expect our return to Atargatis within the month for reassignment. Attribution, unknown provenance. The date is 37 years after the heresy's opening events. A Legion unit, apparently functioning normally, expecting to return to base. There is no record of their return. The unit hasn't been officially accounted for in 30,000 years. The Iron Crusaders chapter is listed in Codex, Space Marines, 5th edition, page 29, among chapters whose current status is uncertain. Their last known action, heading for the Ghoul Stars. No subsequent report. The Black Templars' Oparian Crusade.
Codex, Black Templars, 9th edition, page 20. In M42, the Oparian Crusade disappeared into the Ghoul Stars, though many believe they continue to fight on against the enemies of mankind. A full crusade fleet, post-Great Rift, entering the cluster and going silent. The Nova Marines and 11 other chapters sent to combat the Pale Wasting. 11 chapters lost. 1 chapter returned with empty records. The Imperium's acknowledgement. A stelae in the Imperial Palace on Terra. What the canonical record accumulates from these entries isn't a series of isolated losses. It's a pattern. Imperial forces enter the Ghoul Stars. Forces don't return. Their last known heading is filed. The designation is listed as uncertain or MIA, and the Inquisition does not authorize a search and rescue operation. The Ashen Claws are renegades by now. 10,000 years in the cluster, trading gene seed with the Carcharodons for basic operational continuity, fighting to survive on Atargatis Prime. They fight on. Nobody is sending for them. When the Tyranids reach this deposit, the Ashen Claws, the Iron Crusaders, the Oparian Crusade, and whatever remnant forces survive the Pale Wasting are operating without current Imperial recognition, without supply lines, without any knowledge of what the Imperium's strategic posture currently is toward the cluster. They will engage the Tyranid advance. They will take casualties the Imperium can't account for and won't publicly acknowledge. When the Inquisition eventually asks who was fighting in the cluster's interior, the answer won't be in any accessible record. Deposit 7. The Post-Heresy Classified Backlog. After the heresy, the newly established Inquisition, founded by Malcador the Sigillite to manage the internal threats the heresy had proven were real, inherited responsibility for materials the heresy-era Imperium had not finished classifying. The Inquisition had a clearance system.
Magenta is a canonical tier in that system, documented in Gaunt's Ghosts, Dan Abnett, Black Library, and referenced across multiple primary sources, the tier at which standard inquisitorial operations are authorized. The Lexicanum entry for the Imperial clearance system notes that more levels may also exist between Scarlet and Magenta. Some materials are classified above the operating clearance of most serving inquisitors. The current Inquisition's leadership may not be able to read every document in its own archive. The categories of post-heresy classified backlog identified here: warp resonance artifacts from heresy-era experimentation, incomplete demon-binding works, Primarch-adjacent biological samples with chaotic taint, are canonically real categories of materials the Inquisition manages. Dan Abnett's Eisenhorn Trilogy, Black Library, 2001 to 2012, documents how the Inquisition handles precisely these kinds of objects: cursed books, warp-active languages, demon hosts, artifacts that generate ongoing psychic resonance. The institutional infrastructure for handling such materials is canonical. The specific claim that post-heresy surplus of this material was forwarded to the Ghoul Stars under the disposal protocol is reconstruction, flagged as inference. What the canonical record confirms, the Inquisition inherited a classification problem at the heresy's close that hasn't been fully resolved 30,000 years later. Materials classified above operational clearance levels exist. A region with no return traffic, minimal oversight, and documented resistance to Imperial navigation exists and was already being used as a destination for unrecoverable assets.
The connection between those two facts is inference from consistent institutional behavior across a 30,000-year period. When the Tyranids reach this deposit, the Inquisition is operationally blind.
The clearance architecture that protects the highest classification materials is also the architecture that prevents the current Inquisition leadership from knowing what those materials are. They can't issue a warning about the deposit surfacing, because acknowledging the deposit requires reading a protocol their clearance level may not reach. They can't authorize a containment response because the response would require disclosing what is being contained. The Tyranids will surface the backlog regardless. The Inquisition will respond to the consequences without understanding the cause. The Tyranid bow wave problem. In 977 M41, a Tyranid splinter fleet appeared near the Ghoul Stars and attacked the Sentinel world Orask.
The canonical description from the Ghoul Stars fandom wiki entry is precise. The fleet was disoriented and twisted by its passage through the Ghoul Stars. A Tyranid fleet navigated through the cluster's interior and emerged from the other side, changed. Not weakened in the conventional military sense, disoriented, twisted. Something in the cluster affected the fleet's coherence during transit. The defenders at Orask, backed by a full company of the Red Talon Space Marines and a Titan maniple from the Legio Magna, pushed back a force that had come through the Ghoul Stars carrying whatever it had absorbed there. Hive Fleet Moloch, a canonical Tyranid hive fleet, was active in the galactic northeast, the Ghoul Stars region, in M41. Hive Fleet Kraken descended on the eastern fringe broadly in 995 M41. The post-Great Rift Indomitus era brought new Leviathan tendrils pressing from multiple directions, including the eastern approaches. The eastern fringe is under sustained Tyranid pressure across the current canonical timeline.
Tyranids consume all biological matter and incorporate genetic data into the hive mind's ongoing bioform evolution. They eat to evolve. A fleet passing through the Ghoul Stars, absorbing whatever biological and genetic material exists in the cluster's interior, feeds that data into the hive mind. Data the hive mind has no framework for processing, because the Ghoul Stars deposits include material from before the Tyranids arrived in this galaxy, material engineered by the Old Ones, material with warp resonance properties the hive mind's psychic architecture wasn't designed to accommodate. The 977.M41 fleet emerged disoriented and twisted. That result wasn't random navigational failure. A Tyranid fleet absorbed psychically active, genetically complex, potentially warp-resonant material and tried to integrate it. The fleet survived. It attacked Orask.
Whatever it had absorbed during transit, it carried with it into its assault.
Whether a current feeding pass is specifically targeting the Ghoul Star's interior, whether the deposits are actively surfacing inside the current published timeline, is the prediction drawn from canonical feeding mechanics and the established Tyranid presence in the region. That prediction is labeled as such. The mechanics are confirmed. The presence is confirmed. The deposits are placed in the cluster by canonical implication or direct canon. What the Tyranid feeding process does to what it finds there is a question the canonical record hasn't yet answered. The Imperium knows what it sent east. The Inquisition, at some clearance level, knows precisely. The Tyranids don't know what they are eating. That asymmetry, the Imperium's knowledge, the Tyranids' ignorance, the Inquisition's inability to act on knowledge it can't officially access, is the operational reality the Eastern Fringe is now facing.
The Ghoul Stars aren't unusual in the 40K setting for being dangerous. The Eye of Terror is dangerous. The Maelstrom is dangerous. Those regions are documented, contested, actively campaigned over. They produce canonical battles, crusades, codex entries on both sides of each engagement. The Ghoul Stars produce silence.
Nova Marines who fought an apocalyptic war and agreed not to mention it. A Black Templar's crusade that pushed to an alien homeworld, found it empty, and was called away before the question of where the aliens went could be answered. A rogue trader record from the Covenant of Ikale, 390.M38 to 433.M38. 43 years of war and exploration with the Marines errant inside the cluster, sealed, inviolate by both parties.